Good morning, everybody. If you're out here in the West Coast, everyone else, I think it might be evening. So I hope everyone's having a great day. Here I am talking. My name is Tiffany Toda. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a marriage and family therapist. And I have decided to start this mental health journey beginning with our community of international Arab, because I've noticed, for those that have been following me for a little bit, you know that my intention in doing these lives is to make mental health and emotional health more accessible, to perhaps demystify or destigmatize mental health and what that means. And today we're going to talk about Arabee guilt. Now, for a long time, I knew that Arab in general, as a culture, guilt felt more intensified. It felt more, I can't find the right word, but it just felt more than what I was seeing in my clinical practice. The way Arab experience guilt felt deeper, felt more embedded. It felt more difficult to move through. That's one of the hardest things. And I tell all my Arabee clients this, I tell all my family, to help us move through this Arabee guilt is extremely difficult. So when we talk about this, when we talk about today around Arabee guilt, I want us to be patient with ourselves. I want us to have self-compassion. I want us to be able to understand how complicated and nuanced it is. So, okay, sorry. I was just looking. Hi, everybody. Hey, thanks everybody for joining. Really, really appreciate it. And I was just explaining about Arabee guilt. Now, before I move into what that is, I want us to talk about, if anyone can share, if you feel comfortable, what happens, hi Mira, what happens, just think about guilt in general. What happens to you when you're feeling guilty about something? Just name some things. You're starting to feel guilty, some emotions come up. What usually happens to you? Excuse me. I know for myself, sometimes I'll get ruminating thoughts. So if I did something that I felt was not in alignment with my values, I'll start fixating on it. Yes, you don't sleep. That's another big one. No sleep, stomach ache. Yes, well, I'll definitely talk about the physical symptoms of guilt and shame and what that means. Exactly. Now, many times, so you think about your stomach or sleep or any somatic experience you're going to have on the body. We typically, in general, as a culture, we like to bury things. We like to suppress things. So we will bury our guilt many times, or we'll come from family systems that bury all the gunk that perhaps happened. They don't address it. They don't acknowledge it. They don't talk about it. And then it's just literally hoisted in their autonomic nervous system. So it's like in that amnesic zine, we find that many times they're so amnesic zine. Well, a lot of times it's that guilt and it's that shame that they may be struggling with. So as Arab, we bury our guilt. The other thing we do is we overcompensate. So if we're feeling any kind of way or feeling some shame about ourselves, we will go above and beyond, doing everything for everyone. That's that people pleaser. So I want to show you guys the correlation between Arabee guilt and shame and the behaviors that are associated with it. So we bury it, we suppress it, we will numb it, sometimes with drugs, alcohol, food. We will overcompensate by doing so much for everybody to try and fill that part of us that never feels good enough. Not anyone that I know, because I typically don't surround myself with these types of people. However, there are people who will minimize what they've done and blame other people for it. Well, you did this to me. Well, I did that to you. And that's why I did that to you, because you, and it's that tit for tat. Do you guys know people like that? I haven't had those people in my life for a long time, but I see with Arab, if somebody says, hey, you hurt me, then what does the auntie say back? Well, look what you did to me. And you have to think about, yes, exactly. Thank you for people validating that. And so when we as a culture start to blame ourselves, like you're doing this tit for tat, and I'm seeing it a lot now in just all the discourse, it really creates a unhealthy and toxic environment. Let's see. You can't have a successful breakthrough with that person. Absolutely not. That's absolutely not. You just walk away, ignore, try not to engage with that person. Now, this goes into people's lines of reasoning. They will cover their guilt with all kinds of excuses. They will say things like, well, I had to do that for this reason, and to absolve themselves of the harm that they've done to others. Now, I can only speak to each and every one of you who's on this live right now, to really think through, the more you suppress your emotions or your guilt or your shame, the more you may become depressed. What you suppress depresses. What you resist persists. It is so important, and I know it's hard, and this is a tough topic, especially إحنا العرب, إحنا in the diaspora, which I'll talk about that later. To suppress your guilt or the things that you've done is just a recipe for mental health issues, particularly anxiety. Think about all the Arab that you know. How many struggle with anxiety? How many? Just kind of take a look. Anybody want to give me a general percentage of how many people you know struggle with anxiety or depression? All of them. Thank you, Mita. Yeah. Pammy, you put a medal. Oh, we get the medals of honor for anxiety and depression. Yes, because we come from a culture that we were taught to suppress our feelings. We were taught not to talk about our feelings. And so in that, it exacerbates guilt and it exacerbates shame. Now, let's talk about working definitions around that. I like to contextualize this definition is like, think of guilt as your guiding principles. Like when you start to feel guilty, it's like, what behavior am I engaging in that's keeping me from living in my alignment? It's like your compass, right? It's that feeling inside that says, I acted out of line, I acted out of character, I needed to make a change, but I didn't. So it's a behavior. So that's what you need to remember. Guilt is the things that you do. It shows us where we're out of our integrity, out of our values. Does that make sense? Now, it's also, instead of suppressing it, I always like to tell people, lean into it, because it's a nudge into what is going to bring you back into alignment with who you are, right? So it's, I'm not bad, but I did something that was not okay, and I must do better. Now, many times Arab carry guilt. They feel guilty and they're not doing anything wrong. So I want you guys to ask yourself, what are you doing that's causing the guilt. And we'll talk about more steps a little later. Guilt is very uncomfortable and it's very unpleasant. And if you are not used to, your nervous system may be fighting you to feel it or to lean into it. So as you start to practice self-awareness, it's going to be important for you to say, this is really uncomfortable. And in times it can be very painful. So that stomach, right? That pain in your stomach, someone had mentioned, the anxiety, being disappointed, all that you're feeling on a bodily level. Well, let me tell you, it's going to be uncomfortable, but the more you can lean into it, the more you can face it, the more you can bring it up, right? Not resist it, but just say, okay, let me take a look. I can tell you, your body will thank you. Your body will say, oh, I finally get to release this, or I finally get, and then you will start to feel better. People think if you suppress it and you bury it, khalas, like it's over. It doesn't, no, your body will absolutely remind you every single time you're in a situation that's going to bring up the guilt. So let's give your body some respite. Let's give it a break by sitting in the discomfort for just a little bit. Now, one thing I need to let people know, guilt is not debilitating. Shame can be debilitating. However, guilt typically, in the true sense of the word, when it's not debilitating. If anything, it's temporary. And you can actually do something with it by making amends, taking accountability, changing your behavior. So that's what I want to reframe our Arabee guilt to say, hey, wait a minute. You can do something with this. You can ease your suffering by taking accountability. When I say amends, it's as simple as saying, I'm sorry, I hurt you. Or if you, cheated someone or felt like you got over on someone, well, you can always go back and make amends with them. And then, of course, you can always change your behavior. Just try not to do it again. And understand your reasons why you're doing it. Now, if guilt is our compass, guilt is like who we are. Now, think about shame. Dun, 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 shame. Shame, shame, shame. We, as Arab, just as a side note, culturally, what I've noticed, and I'm really trying to change this as a clinician, is we need to stop shaming each other, because guess what? That shame is the abyss. It is a black hole. We can go so deep into our shame as Arab. It sucks us into, hi there, nice to see you. Thanks for hopping on. That as Arab, it's like this black hole. It sucks us into this abyss and darkness. And sometimes I say our shame is like, especially for women, it's like this lineage. It's like not just ihna, our mothers, our grandmothers, it's sitnas. It's like this entire lineage. And for any men that's on here, I would love it if you can chime in about how that looks like for men. But I can say for women is when you are in that abyss of shame, there is no light. You feel like you cannot escape. And shame says, I am bad. I am broken. I am flawed. Is it ever okay to lose it on someone? Oh, well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that around boundaries and how you want to work through some of the guilt, some of the shame. We'll talk about that towards the end. So let's pin that. So shame is usually your core belief about yourself. Now, anybody have core beliefs that they want to address? What are some core beliefs that you guys have about yourself? That's where the shame comes from. I am blank. So here, I am bad, I am broken, I am unworthy. What are some common core beliefs we have when it comes to shame? I'll give you guys like a minute to think about it if anyone wants to share their core belief. Because as a Arab, for me, it's about addressing that first when I'm working with our cultures. Say, and usually in Western, you do the opposite. You address the guilt and not the shame. It's like you look at their behavior. But with Arab, I always like to do, let's look at what are your core beliefs. Now I know, okay, I am sensitive. That's right. And I am too sensitive. But I'm not. Is it about being sensitive, or that you were told that you were sensitive because you were a feeler in a culture that emotionally teaches you to suppress? So I always say for my sensitive folks, yes, you probably are more attuned and you're an absorber versus an observer. And so for many Arab, when you're feeling and you're in a culture that emotionally suppresses you, well, you're going to feel like you're too sensitive. I am weak. Okay, thank you. Yes, Mira, sometimes I am weak, or I'm not capable. I am not good enough. So we need to, now what I'd like you to do, now that you know guilt is your compass, it's your guiding, shame is the core beliefs, the abyss that you're probably driving a lot of your thoughts and behaviors that come from that. Think of, and going back to somebody that says is it ever okay to lose it on someone? Okay, here we go. I want you guys to think about a situation, recent or not, where you lost your temper, or you felt completely helpless, or you became emotionally overwhelmed. Now, think about, I just kind of gave a couple of examples, but think about where you lost your temper, felt powerless or helpless, or a situation where you were just very overwhelmed. Think about that. What do you remember about this incident? And think about, as you're thinking about that, the inner critic that said to you in the aftermath of this situation, what were the messages that you told yourself in that incident? Now, I always tell people, you cannot tell me anything bad about myself that I haven't told. Like, we are our worst critics. Like, the things that we tell ourselves are absolutely horrific. Now, what were some things you told yourself when you lost your temper, or you felt helpless or weak? What are some of the messages you told yourself in that incident? I can give an example. One time, I have a tendency to react strongly. And every time I lose my temper, I start to feel this intense shame of I am, out of control, that I cannot control myself. I'm out of control. When my cultural beliefs have been, you must stay, we almost have a very limited emotional range. So every time, even though my anger may be warranted or my frustration may be warranted, I would still feel this intense shame that I am flawed, or that I'm this irrational person. Yes, okay, feeling glad that you were honest, but felt bad about hurting them. Well, part of it is you didn't hurt them. How they received your message was how they received your message. It's on them. Now, if you called them out in a way that was harmful or shaming, then that may be going to guilt. Maybe I could have communicated that better. Now, this is where we begin. Now, I want us to move a little bit further around what emotions did you start experiencing when you started feeling the guilt? or I mean this shame, on a bodily level? What did you notice? Somebody before said stomach ache. So now that you know that you have these core beliefs, our body is going to give us a signal. What are your signals when you start to feel guilty? Stomach ache, headache, muscle tension? Anybody experience any of those things? Sometimes it will lead to ruminating thoughts, which will decrease sleep. Self-loathing. Yeah, fatigue and body pain. A lot of Arab experience autoimmune disorders, and that comes from, well, variety of reasons, but a lot of it is that suppression of the emotion. The body will start to respond through illness. Overthinking, absolutely. Sometimes we put others ahead of ourselves. And that could be detrimental, because when we put others ahead of ourselves, that could lead to chronic loneliness. It could lead to nobody is there for me. And typically you may have evidence that will support that. Sometimes it's feelings of inferiority, or you'll have social anxiety. So, and then we come from a culture that forces you, many times cultural expectations, they force you to go to events. They force you to do things, perhaps that maybe you don't want to do. And social anxiety, you feel this constant self-loathing, or you go into Arabee hafla, or an event, and because of all the judgment and all the eyes on you, and you're in your self-loathing, and then sometimes you say things or do things that are not even in alignment, and then you don't know where you're coming or going. Did anybody ever have that experience? When you're in, because I don't think we talk about that enough as it relates to how we move in these Arabee circles. Yeah, we're constantly in this vortex of, oh my gosh, are they looking at me? Did I do this? Do I feel guilty for guilty? You didn't do anything wrong, but you'll feel guilty for dressing like a certain way, or having your hair a certain way, or having your makeup a certain way. Maybe you feel good about it, but you feel guilty, Ashan, you're being you. That makes no sense. And it's that shame. I am bad. But where did that core belief come from? Right. So now that, because one of the things why I always draw it back to your physical symptoms in your body, because your body has a wealth of information if you just pay attention to it. And many times we're not paying attention to our body at all, or we numb it with marijuana, alcohol, food, because we don't want to feel it, because we come from a culture of emotional suppression. And so if you were to feel it, be in that discomfort, and sometimes it's excruciating, and you take a deep breath and you go, oh, I'm feeling my digestion is off. What's going on within me? I'm feeling tension in my shoulders. Maybe you have butterflies in your belly. It's about acknowledging discomfort. Sometimes I see a lot of Arab picking. We pick or chew on the lip, or bite the nails, or we pick a lot. I see that, this nervousness. And that typically is a physical symptom of this anxiety that may be as a result of the shame. Again, if you're not doing anything wrong, it's a shame you're experiencing, and it's about paying attention, going, oh, body, what am I doing? Taking a deep breath and noticing, are you in an environment that's squeezing you, or creating this within you? Right now, I think it's important to acknowledge that those of us in the diaspora, Arab in the diaspora, are feeling an intense amount of survivor's guilt as a result of what's happening in our respective homelands. Now, this survivor's guilt is typically when you start to say to yourself, I can't live because they're dying. Who am I to find joy if they're in such chaos? Now, if you're asking yourself, how can I live when they are suffering? This is all about, yes, exactly. Thank you. I feel guilty for living my life. That's right. And that's a part of survivor's guilt. Other Arab, because we're so good at shaming ourselves and making other people feel guilty. It's very manipulative, by the way. Other Arab may make you feel guilty for living. I've seen that a lot online where someone, oh, I don't know if this has happened to me. You know, you're posting something joyous that you've experienced, and people will shame you for that. How can you do that? Guilty for living, guilty for breathing, guilty for existing, guilty from conception until death. إحنا العرب, sometimes إحنا بنات العرب, we were born, and this is when I talk about in my cultural messaging workshop, sometimes from the womb, we were guilty, عشان maybe we were a girl, and this is maybe my generation, hopefully they've changed that now, where you're born a girl and they wanted a boy. And then just out of the womb, you're already feeling guilty for who you are. Every second of your life is like haunted with this soul crushing guilt. And now you add everything that's happening in our respective homelands, and you're seeing this increase in our community. That's why I started this. I mean, I wanted to do this 10 years ago, but that's why I started this now, because our communities are suffering behind their existing guilt, and now let's add survivor's guilt on top of that. So how do we heal as a community? What do we do with this? And the only way out of guilt is you. The only way out of guilt and shame is you. Yet many of us are enslaved. And I say this with so much love. However, I want to acknowledge many of us are enslaved to our families, to our community, to our churches, to our imams, to our mosque, to other teachers. We are enslaved to whatever they need us to be or whatever they want us to be. And the goalpost keeps moving. So you could be posting every day about what's happening in our respect. You could do everything. And then the one time you put, oh, here, I'm enjoying a nice dinner. Oh, look at what you did. And we're constantly under this microscope scrutinizing one another. For what? Why do we do that to each other? To keep us in this control, to keep us in this guilt, because when you're feeling guilty and when you're feeling the shame, people can easily manipulate you and control you. So it's going to be so important for you to have self-reflection and self-awareness and body awareness. When your body starts to feel guilty, the first question you ask yourself, what did I do wrong? What behavior am I engaging in? And if you're not doing anything wrong, you need to go, uh-oh, I got triggered a response. It is extremely difficult. Arabee guilt, I said this at the beginning and I'll say it 100 times. As a clinician, it is one of the most difficult things for me as a therapist to help Arab move through. In fact, if I'm going to be fully self-disclosing, I did not want to work with Arab for the majority beginning of my career because of Arabee guilt. I was like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. And through my own development and my own learning, I said, our community is suffering behind this guilt and the shame. Okay? We're suffering behind this. And how do we change it? Now, the only way we can change it is for you to feel what you feel in your body and go, okay, if I'm not doing anything wrong, it's a shame response. What was triggered? So now we're moving into um, how to resolve this for yourself. Now, it's feeling the feelings. So you may feel remorse. Oh, I love that, the little apple. Feeling the remorse for what you did. So let's say you did do something and you didn't feel good about it. Okay, so you feel the remorse and then you ask. So depending on, it doesn't matter your religion. All religions talk about repentance. Okay, all religions. Even if you're not religious, you can have this forgiveness, self-compassion, self-forgiveness to go, okay, I messed up. Okay. I like to curse. I was like, okay, I fucked up. Okay. Now what do I want to do with that? Forgive my Tiff. Okay, you made a mistake. It happens. Self-compassion. Then you ask yourself, how do I resolve it? How do I resolve it? Now you resolve it by saying to yourself, I'm not going to do that again. But what do I need to create in my life so as I won't do that again? Because sometimes it's a work in progress, like my temper. It took me a long time, many years to get through. Now it's like if I have a reaction, I'll stop and I'll go, okay, am I stressed? Did I eat? Did I sleep? Did I, right? And then you stop yourself and then you create um, this resolve to change whatever is going on within you so that behavior doesn't happen again. And then the last one is repair, to make amends. I was talking to a few Arab about fil Arabi, how often, so that goes to the repair. How do you make amends? In Arabi, how often do you hear متأسف, right? Isn't that sorry, Mira? Like متأسف, I'm sorry. What's I'm sorry fil Arabi, right? How often do you hear I'm sorry? Right? Do you hear it a lot or do you not hear it? Because I know in my life I have yet to receive an apology from most people in my life for the wrongs that they have done, right? And so we may be saying sorry. I'm sorry for my existence. I'm sorry for breathing. I'm sorry for, right. So, but for many of us, this everyone is sorry for their experience. Yes, but how often do you hear sorry? Yes. Well, Chris, say sorry a lot because you're apologizing for your existence. Oh, right. I love that. Pam said back home, we'd even use sorry to get the attention of a waiter at a restaurant. Okay. But I'm saying in the way of amends, maybe I'm not being clear. In the way of amends, someone saying sorry to you. I'm sorry that I wronged you. How often do you hear that? I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry my behavior caused you harm. How often have you heard that in your life? Never, barely? Mm-hmm. I won't say it unless I was truly wrong. Yes, very good. But how often do you hear it from other people? We come from a culture where our parents will say, I'm sorry through food, I'm sorry through money, I'm sorry through other things, but to take accountability and to make amends, we don't have that modeling. So the reason why I emphasize that is because for you to make amends or to repair harm to another person, you may not have good modeling around that. And you may need somebody to help you coach you through that. Okay. So, because there's ways to make repair. And as a culture, I can say, I'm almost positive people can come back and tell me I'm wrong, but we have very, very poor modeling around making amends. Because we're always, there's always arguing and that tit for tat I was talking to you guys about earlier. So let me review that. You start to feel guilty. You want to feel the feelings, feel the remorse, feel it. Okay, I messed up. Then you want to repent or self-compassion, self-forgiveness in whatever your religion is or through your own higher self. Then you want to resolve it by promising to yourself you will not do it again. Don't promise it to the other person because you're a human being and you may fail again, and that's okay, but make a promise to yourself. What do I need to do to resolve this, that this behavior doesn't occur again? And that takes self-awareness of your body. And then the third one, the last one is repair. That is so key in moving through the guilt for the wrongs that we've done. And then you make amends. All right. Okay. One thing as a society, I can say that women experience more shame than men in our culture due to cultural, societal, and expectations imposed upon us. Any other, okay, any other questions on guilt or shame before I move into the last bit of how to overcome Arabee guilt? Let's see, when I was young, I was the one not to speak up. As an adult, I learned to communicate kindly while things bother me. And yes, exactly. So this is where growth comes in from. And that's where, when you're asking yourself, and now we're going to wrap up, determine the source of your guilt or shame. Did you do something wrong, or did somebody instill that in you? What labels did you receive as a child? So somebody said too sensitive. You're too sensitive. Maybe I got a a lot. I got, you know, um, those types of words that can instill shame. Or you're not smart enough. Or your brother is smarter than you. Or your cousin is performing better than you. Determine the source of where your guilt is coming from, if it's a behavior, and if it's shame, I'm not good enough, where did that come from? And a lot of that, it comes from our childhood messaging. The next thing is to be open about your feelings. Now, how many people have folks in their life that they could talk about, like, hey, I did this really crappy thing and I feel bad about it, without having that other person shame you or make you feel bad? How many people have loving, compassionate, neutral people that you can share your feelings with? Because the more you bottle it up, like I said earlier, the more you resist, persists. Who can you talk to if you're feeling ashamed about your behavior? And a lot of times we don't have people in our life, and that's why people go to a therapist to talk about it. And I agree. It's like 50 minutes of somebody's undivided attention. They will not judge you. Well, hopefully not. And if they do, not a good fit, get a new therapist. This is where it's we're so used to living with the guilt. We're so used to it that it's almost like breathing. And sometimes it's easier to live with the guilt than to acknowledge the things that we've done. And so it's going to be really important that you consider talking to somebody about those feelings. Um, we talked about amends, giving back to others. Um, Guilt can be really overpowering, like if we're not doing something, because we're a culture of doers. We're like, if we sit down for 5 minutes, we feel guilty. And it's about, sometimes that guilt is very overpowering, and it can cause you so much stress that you may have trouble concentrating. You're focused on your attention elsewhere. Even if you're not sure how to deal with the unhealthy guilt, please rest. Give yourself permission. Do a relaxing activity. Go walk in nature. Don't add more to your to-do list, that your nervous system's not going to like that. It's about taking a nap. But I feel guilty for napping. I have all this stuff I have to do. Trust me, your nervous system is saying, go to sleep, take a nap, go rest, go have lunch with a friend. The to-do list is going to be endless. Just leave it. When you're that anxious, your body needs rest. When you're depressed, you need to move. Okay. I discussed that. I have a workshop coming up if anyone's interested on October 23rd. I'm collaborating with my fabulous colleague, Nina Bratcher, and we're going to talk about the relationship of our autonomic nervous system. You can find that on a link in my bio. So, dealing with the guilt and shame, you want to focus on the things that you can control. And many times we cannot control how others see us, how the community sees us. We can only control what we know. Because if you seek that from the community, what's going to happen is it's going to exacerbate that shame. And, and the last to this is to practice gratitude. Practice gratitude for being here. Thank yourself for taking this opportunity to start to explore this guilt and shame. That's the first step, is being grateful for the work that you are doing and the insights that you do have. And sometimes that's all you can do. And I don't think we as a culture give ourselves credit enough, because we're constantly in that core belief of I'm not good enough, to recognize all the things you do. And you are probably doing so much more than your shame cycle gives you credit for, that your that your Arabee guilt gives you credit for. And so a beautiful practice is just showing yourself gratitude, whether it's at the beginning of the day, midday, it doesn't matter, end of the day, of all the things you did do. And it may help with saying, oh, I did a lot today. It may help with those core beliefs of I'm not good enough. And then if you're feeling guilty that you weren't everything to everyone, and you see this laundry list of things you did, you go, oh man, I did a lot. What am I feeling guilty for? And if you have people in your life who are going to shame you, manipulate, to make you, they can't make you feel guilty, only you can allow them to make you feel guilty. But if they're the type of people that are going to constantly press you and squeeze you, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you're not enough, you didn't, those are the proceed with caution. Have it go in one ear and out the other. But it just stays stuck to us. And just recognize they're limited, recognize that you're on your path, and be grateful you're on this path, because on the other side of it, if you could really work through this Arabee guilt and work through the shame, you will, I shouldn't say will, but I can almost say you will have improved mental health outcomes. But you have to do the work. You don't do the work, you don't practice, it's not going to change. And that requires daily, nobody likes to hear that, but it's daily self-reflection on how you're moving in your world. And if you're constantly feeling guilty, you will stay stuck in a shame cycle that will never end. And we all have mothers and grandmothers and aunties and cousins, the elders, who live in that. And it's horrible. And you have to ask yourself, do I want to live in that? So, with that said, give yourselves a good squeeze and a pat on the back to say, yes, you got through working through probably one of the toughest topics in mental health, and that's guilt and shame. All right, you guys. Anybody, before we hop off, I'd love to hear topics for next week. If anybody wants me to focus on, I mean, I have a whole laundry list, but if anybody wants me to address something specific, let me know. Put in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to do a topic on that uh, in the future. All right. I love you guys. Have a wonderful day, and minimize that guilt.